Welcome to Chapter 10, Part 3, the muscular system. So today we're going to talk about the muscles of the lower limbs, like the hip, the knee joint, and the muscles of the lower limbs. Now, muscles crossing the hip and that knee joint are able to flex, extend. They can abduct, adduct, and the circumduction and rotation is all possible with these different muscles and joints. Okay, now we have thigh flexors that pass in front of the hip joint. Couple of examples, iliacus, this one right here, and psoas major. These are the prime movers of flexion in your thigh. We also have rectus femoris, that's a prime mover. And then in general, the thigh flexors are assisted by medial adductors and other muscles, such as the muscle sartorius. So we're going to learn these muscles. And the first muscle we're going to learn today is called iliacus. And you can see it's highlighted here in blue. Okay, and it lays on the ilium. So the origin's the ilium, and then it inserts into the lesser trochanter of the femur. Its primary action is thigh flexion, and it's actually a prime mover in flexing your thighs. That's iliacus. The next one is called psoas major, and it runs, the origin is going to be along the lumbar, all of the lumbar vertebrae, and it starts at the T12, which is the lowest thoracic vertebrae. And technically, the actual origin, it's on all of these vertebrae, but it's on the body and the transverse processes and the intervertebral discs of T12 and all of the lumbar, 1 through 5. Okay, the insertion point is similar to iliacus in that it is the femur, the lesser trochanter. This muscle allows lateral flexion of the vertebral column. So lateral flexion. Sartorius. Sartorius muscle is referred to as the tailor's muscle. And it got this name a long time ago when seamstresses and tailors basically, because they cross their legs during when they're working on their sewing machines and things like that, and it just got that name. And the origin is the anterior superior iliac spine. It's going to wrap around all of these quad muscles, and it inserts down here. Near the knee into the tibia. All right, the action of this muscle is lateral flexion and rotation of the thigh, and then again it helps with crossing your legs. Okay, here we're going to watch a couple of videos on some of the muscles we've discussed so far.
Iliopsoas is one of a group of 9 flexor muscles that cross the hip joint. It consists of 3 separate muscles, the psoas minor, the psoas major, and the iliacus. Psoas minor is quite small, often absent, and is thus considered an unimportant member of the group. The origins of psoas major are from the vertebral bodies, transverse processes, and intervertebral discs of T12 through L5. The fibers run inferiorly and pass behind the inguinal ligament. They then wrap around the femoral head to insert onto the lesser trochanter. The origins of iliacus are from the superior 2/3 of the iliac fossa, the internal border of the iliac crest, and the ala of the sacrum. The fibers converge to insert onto the lesser trochanter with the psoas major tendon. The shared tendon is known as the iliopsoas tendon. With the origin fixed, the iliopsoas flexes the femur onto the trunk. With the insertion fixed and acting bilaterally, it flexes the trunk onto the femur. Psoas major is innervated directly by the lumbar plexus, while the iliacus is innervated by the muscular branch of the femoral nerve.
Next group of muscles we're going to talk about are the adductor muscles, which medially rotate the thigh, and then also is utilized to press thighs together. Now, an overstretched thigh muscle is referred to, from this group specifically, is referred to as a pulled groin. This group specifically are the adductors: adductor magnus, longus, brevis, pectineus, gracilis. Okay, so we're going to go through each muscle and the origin, insertion, and action of each. Now, this is the adductor magnus muscle, and here it's highlighted in blue. And then this is the anterior view, so the front view, and this is the posterior view. And of course, you can tell because there is the sacrum. That's a good thing to always look for. And then clearly, this is the pubic symphysis. The origin is at the ischial and pubic ramus and ischial tuberosity, which is actually more visible on this side, right? On the posterior view. And the insertion is on the femur, and you can see that it's here and here. Okay, his job is to adduct, medially rotate and flex the thigh. So remember, bringing thighs together and also allowing that medial rotation and flexion. Okay, our adductor longus, the origin is at near the pubic symphysis, right there. There's a pubic symphysis right next to it, and it inserts in this area of the femur called the linea aspera, and it's that rough surface of the femur. And the actions are the same as magnus. It adducts, medially rotates, and flexes the thigh. Remember, these are a group of muscles that ultimately support one another and typically will have the same action or a very similar action. Okay, brevis, adductor brevis, you can see here in blue, and it's kind of, remember, brevis means short. It's the shorter one, right? And its origin is right there at the pubis, and then the insertion is the linea aspera, which is that region of the femur, and it has the same action as the other two adductor muscles. Okay, let's check out pectineus. This muscle is interesting because it's quite wide, in my opinion, and so you see this big origin that stretches right across the pubis. And then there it is. Okay, and then of course the insertion is at the femur, and it shares that job in adduction, medial rotation, and flexion of the thigh. Okay, let's look at the next muscle in this group. That's pectineus. This one is gracilis. And this one is pretty interesting because it wraps around, and look where it inserts. So this is a muscle that, you know, is associated, and it crosses this knee joint. All right, so let's take a look. The origin is the pubis and ischium of the of the hip bone, right? And it inserts way down here at the tibia. And this muscle, adducts, medially rotates and flexes the leg, and it assists in walking, which is, quite significant. Okay, now I want to show you guys a quick video that recaps these muscles as a group, and I do want you to lump them into a group. These are, the adductor muscles that medially rotate the thigh, all right, and move and adducts the thigh, right? And the muscles we talked about previously, the iliacus, psoas major, sartorius, all of these, their job was they were thigh flexors that pass in front of the hip joint. Okay, so these distinctions are important. I want you to know the muscles themselves, and then if they belong to a group like the adductor group, or the quad group, or the glute group, or the thigh flexor group, I want you to know them grouped and individualized. All right, and that's normal for anatomy. All right, let's check out this next video on the adductor muscles.
There are 5 medial muscles that cross the hip joint: the adductor magnus, the gracilis, the pectineus, the adductor brevis, and the adductor longus. The adductor magnus originates on the inferior ramus of the pubis, as well as the ramus and tuberosity of the ischium. The muscle inserts on the linea aspera, the gluteal tuberosity, and the medial supracondylar line of the femur. The gracilis muscle originates on the body and inferior ramus of the pubis, and the ramus of the ischium. The insertion is on the medial surface of the tibia, just below the tibial condyle. The pectineus muscle originates on the superior ramus of the pubis, and inserts on the spiral line of the femur. The adductor brevis originates on the body and inferior ramus of the pubis, and inserts on the linea aspera of the femur. The adductor longus originates on the body and inferior ramus of the pubis, near the pubic symphysis, and inserts on the linea aspera of the femur, below the adductor brevis.
The next group of muscles we're going to talk about is the quad muscles, and more accurately, they are called the quadriceps femoris. And why would we call something femoris? And from our education so far, we know that femoris means femur, and quad means 4. And everyone's heard of your quads. So we're going to learn our quads. Now we know that the quads are 4 muscles, and they arise from 4 separate heads. They, of course, are at the front and side of your thigh. And what's interesting about them is that they all insert into your what is called the quadricep tendon. So we have a tendon that all 4 muscles insert into. Okay, which that tendon then inserts into the patella, which is your kneecap, and then into the tibial tuberosity. So they cross the knee and then insert over there on the tibia. So these muscles have a great impact on your legs. They are incredibly powerful for knee extension. The first muscle in the quads that we're going to discuss today is called rectus femoris. The rectus femoris muscle. I want you guys to remember what we learned early on in regards to muscle names. Now, why would we call this rectus femoris? Rectus means that the fibers are running erect, straight up and down, right? And femoris, meaning that it's located at the femur. So, this is the rectus femoris here in blue. And if you look closely at that, there's your patella. And we can't exactly see the insertion point because it's covered. But our origin and insertion, let's start with the origin, is the anterior superior iliac spine. Okay, and then to keep things simple, the insertion is going to be the patella and tibia. And its action is extension of the leg and flexion of your thigh at the hip. This is a very strong muscle. The next one is called vastus lateralis. Vastus lateralis is on the lateral side of the body, and the origin is on the femur, and specifically at the greater trochanter, and it's going to insert in the same location as rectus femoris at the patella and tibia. Okay, now the action of this muscle. This muscle helps the leg extend, and it stabilizes your knee. So it has a big role in that stability. Your knee joint is incredibly sensitive because you have to think about this. Look at the knees. Okay. All of the human body's weight is, all that pressure and weight is sitting on that joint. And really, it's the femur and tibia that are carrying the majority of the weight, but this joint takes a lot of, the pressure, force, and carries a lot of the body's weight. All right, the next one is called vastus medialis. And it's called that for obvious reasons because it's medial. Okay, and the origin is at the femur. It's covered by a muscle, but we know it's there, and it inserts at the patella and tibia. This one extends the leg. All right, our next muscle is the vastus intermedius, and it actually lies underneath the rectus femoris. So here's rectus femoris, right? And what they've done on the other leg here is they've removed the other three muscles, and you can see very clearly vastus intermedius. Remember, intermedius is going to be completely intermediate to the lateral and the medial, right? Okay, because remember, this is vastus lateralis over here. Vastus medius over here. This is rectus femoris right here. And then when we pull this back, this is the intermedius. And that's a quick way to remember is, think of, the medius being middle, okay, lateral being lateral, on the outside, intermediate or medius being in between, and then indeed, rectus femoris is in between as well on top of vastus intermedius. Of course, the origin here is the femur, and the insertion is going to be the same as the others, which is the patella and tibia, and this muscle extends the leg. All right. So we're going to watch a couple of videos on the quad muscles. These videos are quite spectacular.
The rectus femoris is the anterior member of the muscle group of the anterior thigh known as the quadriceps femoris. Rectus femoris has two tendons. The straight tendon originates from the anterior inferior iliac spine and gives rise to the straight head. The reflected tendon originates from a groove superior to the rim of the acetabulum and gives rise to the reflected head. The fibers run inferiorly to insert onto the superior border of the patella and to the tibial tuberosity via the patellar ligament. The rectus femoris flexes the thigh at the hip and extends the leg at the knee. It is innervated by the femoral. The rectus femoris is the anterior member of the muscle group of the anterior thigh known as the quadriceps femoris. Rectus femoris has two tendons. The straight tendon originates from the anterior inferior iliac spine and gives rise to the straight head. The reflected tendon originates from a groove superior to the rim of the acetabulum and gives rise to the reflected head. The fibers run inferiorly to insert onto the superior border of the patella and to the tibial tuberosity via the patellar ligament. The rectus femoris flexes the thigh at the hip and extends the leg at the knee. It is innervated by the femoral.
Okay, it's the femoral nerve. I thought something was wrong with I thought I did something wrong, but apparently the video is just cutting off. All right, that's all right. Let's go to the next muscle, the vastus lateralis muscle.
Vastus lateralis is the lateral member of the muscle group of the anterior thigh known as the quadriceps femoris. The origins of vastus lateralis are from the greater trochanter, the intertrochanteric line, and the lateral lip of the linea aspera of the femur. The fibers run inferiorly to insert onto the quadriceps femoris tendon, the superior and lateral borders of the patella, and to the tibial tuberosity via the patellar ligament. The vastus lateralis extends the leg at the knee. It is innervated by the femoral nerve.
All right, medialis.
Vastus medialis is the medial member of the muscle group of the anterior thigh known as the quadriceps femoris. The origins of vastus medialis are from the intertrochanteric line of the anterior-medial femur, from the linea aspera, and the medial supracondylar line of the posterior femur. The fibers run inferiorly to insert onto the quadriceps femoris tendon, the superior and medial borders of the patella, and to the tibial tuberosity via the patellar ligament. The vastus medialis extends the leg at the knee. It is innervated by the femoral nerve.
And then our intermedius.
Vastus intermedius is the intermediate and deep member of the muscle group of the anterior thigh known as the quadriceps femoris. The origins of vastus intermedius are from the anterior and lateral surfaces of the shaft of the femur. The fibers run inferiorly to insert onto the deep part of the superior border of the patella and to the tibial tuberosity via the patellar ligament. The vastus intermedius extends the leg at the knee. It is innervated by the femoral nerve.
Okay, let me kind of recap that. Now, our quadriceps, 4 muscles. rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, medialis, intermedius. Next, we're going to check out the glutes. There's three muscles that are grouped together that make up the glutes. Okay, the first one is the gluteus maximus, and that's your butt muscle, basically. And now let's take a look at the origin. The origin's quite big, and part of it's on the ilium, and then the sacrum, and the coccyx bone, all the way down. And it inserts at the femur. Clearly, the gluteus maximus is a major thigh extensor, and it's a muscle that we utilize for climbing and for climbing stairs and walking, of course, and definitely has it's one of our bigger, stronger muscles in the lower limb area. Okay, a supportive muscle is the next one. It's the gluteus medius. And so you see it here highlighted in blue. And so technically, when the way they've done it is they've allowed us to see it, but really we can only see part of it when the gluteus maximus is present. Okay, either way, gluteus medius, the origin is the ilium, and if you see, it's connected across the entire ilium there, and it inserts very specifically at the greater trochanter of the femur, and this muscle helps to abduct, okay, away, and medially rotate the thigh. So medially rotate the thigh that way. There we go. All right. So that's maximus, medius, and now minimus. Minimus is the smallest in the group. That's why it's termed minimus, of course. And you can see it right there, and it originates on the ilium as well. And it inserts at the greater trochanter of the femur, and its action is to extend the leg, and all three muscles work in tandem. The next set of muscles we're going to discuss are the glutes, starting with gluteus maximus, medius, and minimus. Maximus is going to laterally rotate the thigh, and then medius and minimus medially rotate the thigh, and ultimately they're abductors and lateral rotators of the leg and thigh. So let's take a look at the maximus. Okay, the gluteus maximus originates in three places. We can see along here on the ilium, and then the sacrum. All of that is the sacrum, and then down here is the coccyx bone, and the insertion is going to be at the femur. It's a major extensor of the thigh, and this muscle is incredibly significant in climbing stairs and walking. I mean, this is one of the major muscles in our body. All right, medius. So here we have it in blue, and they've pulled away maximus. So maximus is over here, right? So medius is partially covered by maximus. So if we go back to the gluteus maximus picture, this is the medius, part of the medius right there. We can see part of it. All right, so in the next image, we can see the whole thing, and its origin is at the ilium. So you can see that across on the ilium, and then of course it's inserting at the greater trochanter of the femur. Okay, now this muscle, its action is to abduct and medially rotate the thigh. Minimus. Okay, gluteus minimus. Now, so it's significantly smaller, and it's underneath maximus and medius, so it's really tucked in there. And see how the entire origin is on the ilium, and then it inserts at the greater trochanter of the femur, and its action is to extend the leg. Let's check out these muscles a little closer.
The gluteus maximus is the large fleshy muscle that forms the bulk of the buttock. The origins of gluteus maximus are from the posterior ilium, sacrum, coccyx, and the sacrotuberous ligament. Some deep fibers insert onto the gluteal tuberosity of the femur. However, the majority of the fibers insert onto the iliotibial tract of the fascia lata. The gluteus maximus is the most powerful extensor of the thigh at the hip. It also assists in lateral rotation of the thigh. It is innervated by the inferior gluteal nerve.
Okay, this one is the medius.
The origin of gluteus medius is from the posterior ilium, inferior to the iliac crest. The insertion is to the lateral surface of the greater trochanter of the femur. The gluteus medius abducts and medially rotates the thigh. Along with gluteus minimus, it also stabilizes the pelvis laterally. It is innervated by the superior gluteal nerve.
The posterior muscles that cross the hip joint begin with 6 deep muscles that are collectively referred to as the lateral rotators, named for their action on the femur. They are the gemellus superior, the gemellus inferior, the obturator externus, the obturator internus, the piriformis, and the quadratus femoris. Superficial to the lateral rotators are the 3 gluteal muscles: the gluteus minimus, the gluteus medius, and the gluteus maximus. And located laterally is the tensor fasciae latae. The gemellus superior originates on the ischial spine and inserts on the greater trochanter of the femur. The gemellus inferior originates on the ischial tuberosity and inserts on the greater trochanter of the femur. The obturator externus originates on the outer surfaces of the obturator membrane, the pubis, the ischium, and the margins of the obturator foramen. The insertion is in the trochanteric fossa of the femur. The obturator internus originates on the inner surface of the obturator membrane and the margins of the obturator foramen. The insertion is on the greater trochanter of the femur. The piriformis originates on the anterior surface of the sacrum and inserts on the greater trochanter of the femur. The quadratus femoris originates on the ischial tuberosity and inserts on the intertrochanteric crest of the femur. The gluteus minimus and medius originate on the lateral surface of the ilium and insert on the greater trochanter of the femur. The gluteus maximus originates on the dorsal ilium, the sacrum, and coccyx, and inserts on the gluteal tuberosity of the femur and the lateral condyle of the tibia via the iliotibial band. Tensor fasciae latae originates on the iliac crest and the anterior superior iliac spine. and inserts on the tibia via the iliotibial band.
Okay, that had some extra information, but is incredibly significant. The next group of muscles we are going to investigate are the hamstrings. Now, our hamstrings are at the back of our thigh, and they're fairly fleshy muscles. They cross two joints, the hip and the knee joint, and they're prime movers. They're the primary movers of thigh extension and knee flexion. So they're incredibly significant muscles here in our leg. And then the sciatic nerve, they're innervated by the sciatic nerve, which everybody knows the sciatic nerve is quite large and incredibly important. So, all right, now pulling a hamstring or injuring a hamstring is very common in athletes. Now let's look at our hamstring. So this view that we have here, you can see the sacrum. So this is the posterior view. And the first muscle we're going to look at is called the biceps femoris. And why do we call this bicep femoris? Remember, bicep means two heads, and femoris is in reference to the femur. All right. Now the origin is on the ischial tuberosity, on the butt bone, and it inserts at the tibia and fibula. So there's the fibula, and we can't see the insertion perfectly on the tibia, but it is there. And its job is to extend the thigh, flex the leg, laterally rotate the leg, and it does so during knee flexion as well. Next one in the hamstring group is called semitendinosus. The semitendinosus muscle, the origin is the same as bicep femoris, ischial tuberosity. This one inserts right into the tibia, and its job is to help extend, well, not help, but it extends the thigh and flexes the leg. The good thing about these pictures is you can see the hamstrings, and then we have our highlighted muscle that we want to focus on. And so I want to point something out really quick. Okay, bicep femoris is, from the posterior view, is lateral. Then semitendinosus is in the middle, and then semimebranosus, this is the next muscle, is medial in the group of hamstrings here. And the origin is the ischial tuberosity, insertion at the tibia, and it extends the thigh, flexes the leg, and it allows for medial rotation. Okay, let's take a look.
Biceps femoris is the lateral member of the muscle group located in the posterior thigh, known as the hamstrings. Biceps femoris has two heads, the long head and the short head. The origin of the long head is by a common tendon with the semitendinosus from the superior and medial surfaces of the ischial tuberosity. The origins of the short head are from the lateral lip of the linea aspera and the lateral supracondylar line of the femur. The fibers run inferiorly and laterally to insert primarily onto the lateral surface of the fibular head, but it also inserts on the adjacent surface of the lateral condyle of the tibia. Both heads of the biceps femoris flex the leg at the knee and laterally rotate the knee. The long head also extends the thigh at the hip. The long head is innervated by the tibial nerve. The short head is innervated by the common fibular nerve.
Okay, next muscle.
Semitendinosus lies posterior to Semimebranosus and is the most superficial member of the muscle group, located in the posterior thigh, known as the hamstrings. The origins of semitendinosus are by a common tendon with the long head of the biceps femoris from the superior and lateral surfaces of the ischial tuberosity. The fibers run inferiorly to insert onto the medial surface of the proximal tibia. Semitendinosus extends the thigh at the hip and flexes the leg at the knee. It also medially rotates the knee during flexion. Semitendinosus is innervated by the tibial nerve. Superior and lateral surfaces. Semimebranosus is the medial member of the muscle group located in the posterior thigh, known as the hamstrings. The origins of semimembranosus are from the superior and lateral surfaces of the ischial tuberosity. The fibers run inferiorly to insert onto the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. Semimembranosus extends the thigh at the hip and flexes the leg at the knee. It also medially rotates the knee during flexion. Semimembranosus is innervated by the tibial nerve.
Alright, we're going to watch this last video before we go to our next group, muscles that act on the hip joint and femur overview.
The largest muscles in the body are found in the lower limb and the associated hip joint. The hip joint is a ball and socket joint, which, similar to the shoulder joint, is capable of a considerable amount of movement. However, in contrast to the shoulder joint, the muscles of the lower limb are adapted more for strength than precision. Nevertheless, the muscles still show a complex array that can be separated into three categories: anterior muscles, medial muscles, and posterior muscles. Flexion of the hip joint results from two prime movers, the iliacus muscle and the psoas major muscle, with the adductor magnus, the pectineus, the adductor brevis, and the adductor longus muscle acting as synergists. Extension results from the adductor magnus as a synergist and the gluteus maximus as the prime mover. Abduction of the hip from the anatomical position results from the gluteus minimus, the gluteus medius, the gluteus maximus, and the tensor fasciae latae. When the hip is already flexed, abduction requires the addition of 5 more muscles: the gemellus superior, the gemellus inferior, the obturator externus, the obturator internus, and the piriformis. The primary mover of adduction is the adductor magnus, with the gracilis, the pectineus, the adductor brevis, and the adductor longus acting as synergists. Lateral rotation is a specialty of the 6 lateral rotators: the gemellus superior, the gemellus inferior, the obturator externus, the obturator internus, the piriformis, and the quadratus femoris. Medial rotation of the hip results from the combined actions of 7 muscles: the gluteus minimus and medius, the tensor fasciae latae, the adductor magnus, the gracilis, the pectineus, and the adductor longus.
All right, that's a great overview of the muscles we've covered, and then some that we have not covered and that we're not going to cover. Now we're going to move into muscles of the calf. The first muscle that we're going to talk about is called the gastrocnemius, and it's this big bellied muscle here in blue. It's called there we go. It looks like 2 muscles, but it's not. It's got 2 bellies. Either way, the origin, both on the femur, okay, and the insertion is all the way down on your heel bone, calcaneus. And these calf muscles, gastrocnemius, and then the other 2 muscles that are involved, they actually all dead end into the same place, and they make up your Achilles tendon. The action of this muscle is plantar flexion of the foot, specifically when the leg is extended. Next muscle, soleus. Now, soleus is behind the gastrocnemius. So they have removed it here in this image so you can see it, but indeed it is behind the gastrocnemius. The origin is the tibia and fibula up here, and it inserts into the gastrocnemius, and together they're all going to make the Achilles. They will make the Achilles. Okay, now the action of this muscle is plantar flexion of the foot. And of course it has a significant role in your locomotion, your posture during walking, running, dancing. That's why it's so important to stretch before exercising. Now this is the third, and this one's pretty interesting because it is so small. Do you see this tiny little muscle here? And it dead ends right into the Achilles. Well, actually, together all 3 muscles make up the Achilles tendon. Now, the origin is, of course, on the femur for this one, and it inserts into the calcaneus. Okay, and it flexes the leg, and it allows plantar flexion. Now, it's very small, of course, and it's underneath the soleus muscle. And what's interesting here is 25% of the population lack this muscle. Now, where's my calf muscle? Okay. This is a small muscle here that, that's fine. We'll cover it really quick. This is a tiny little muscle, but it's important. Popliteus. Now, the origin is on the femur, and specifically, it's connected to the meniscus. And it's short and it's thick, but the fact that it's connected to the meniscus or originates from the lateral meniscus of the knee, you know, this is a strong contributor to knee stabilization. Either way, it inserts into the tibia, and ultimately it's going to allow for flexion, rotation, medially, and ultimately this helps the knee unlock when necessary, when we need it to unlock. Now this is not part of our, this is not one of the muscles that make up the Achilles. I'm going to come back to these videos, but I want to point this out, and this is incredibly important. Okay, these three, Gastrocnemius, Soleus, Plantaris, these three muscles become your Achilles tendon. And the Achilles tendon is that thick tendon, and damaging the Achilles is incredibly dangerous and painful. I mean, athletes tear their Achilles all the time, but this kind of damage it'll wipe you out. It's possible to heal from it, of course, but you won't be able to walk. Definitely crutches. All right, let's go ahead and check out the gastrocnemius.
Gastrocnemius is the large superficial muscle occupying the posterior compartment of the leg. Gastrocnemius has two heads, the medial head and the lateral head. The origin of the medial head is from the posterior femur, superior to the medial condyle. The origins of the lateral head are from the lateral condyle and the posterior surface of the femur. As they pass inferiorly, the two heads converge and give rise to the calcaneal tendon, which inserts onto the posterior calcaneus. Gastrocnemius plantar flexes the foot at the ankle and assists in flexion of the leg at the knee. It is innervated by the tibial nerve.
All right, let's check out the soleus muscle.
Soleus is located in the posterior compartment of the leg, deep to gastrocnemius. The origins of soleus are from the proximal 1/3 of the posterior fibula and the soleal line of the posterior tibia. Soleus passes inferiorly and merges with the deep layer of the calcaneal tendon, which inserts onto the posterior calcaneus. Soleus plantar flexes the foot at the ankle. It is innervated by the tibial nerve.
All right. The next muscle we're going to look at is the flexor digitorum longus. And I have two pictures obviously here, and I wanted you to see two different perspectives of it. Clearly this is the posterior perspective and this is the anterior perspective, even though it's rotated slightly. And what's important here is the fact that it originates at the tibia, but look where it inserts all of these metatarsals. Actually, I'm sorry, not all of them, aside from the toe. The metatarsals, and the toe is not technically a metatarsal. Okay, there we go. So the insertion is what really is fascinating, because it connects to your foot, and metatarsals and the phalanges. Now, this allows for plantar flexion. It also allows you to invert your foot and flex your toes. Tibialis posterior. There is a tibialis anterior, and you know, I want you to understand there are muscles that we're not covering in this lecture, but the ones we are covering are strategically selected for your benefit. Now, the origin of tibialis posterior is going to be at the tibia and fibula, and the insertion is the tarsals and metatarsals, and we don't have a great picture of that, but you can see it on visible body pretty well. And plantar flexion is one of its actions, along with foot inversion and toe flexion. Now, we've just finished part 3 of chapter 10. yes, we have a lot of muscles to learn, but they are manageable because we are learning them over several weeks. Let's talk about diseases and disorders of the muscular system. Muscular dystrophy. Now that one is very interesting. What happens here is it's hereditary, unfortunately. And what ends up happening is dystrophy is deterioration of the muscle. And the muscles start to to break down and disintegrate. And one type of muscle dystrophy, there's more than one. This occurs because basically calcium influx into the muscle cell is limited. Now, we learned earlier that calcium influx is absolutely synonymous with muscle contraction, and if you don't use it, you lose it. So if these muscles are not fully contracting, they are going to deteriorate. Okay, tetanus. All right, everyone's heard of getting a tetanus shot, right? If you get bit by a dog or something like that, you have to get a tetanus shot, or an animal, because of the dangers of this bacteria. So this bacterial toxin can stimulate our neurons to contract muscles that should not be contracting. Very dangerous, very painful. Fibromyalgia, they don't know that much about it, but there's a lot of research going on about this. We do know this. We know it's a chronic pain disorder in muscles and ligaments throughout the body. So it's not just one or two, not one area or one muscle. It's everywhere, unfortunately. And it could be due, science, some research and science is supporting that there could be a decreased level of neurotransmitters that are responsible for pain perception and sleep regulation. Now, the solution, we're still far away from that. Fibromyalgia is more prominent or prone in women. Okay, because of estrogen. Okay, women are more prone to inflammatory pain disorders because of estrogen. Having high concentrations of estrogen is going to always increase inflammation, and that's an issue for women and for men, but it's more prominent in women. Pulling a muscle, that's clearly when a muscle fiber is just overstretched. Unfortunately, it's really hard to heal muscles. Now, fasciitis is inflammation of the fascia, and we have fascia everywhere, especially in our muscular system. And all of our muscles are wrapped in fascia, so this is something that's incredibly painful. Okay, that is the end of chapter 10, and I will see you in our next lecture.